Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Stryftek, and I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. Is it worth your time? On trial today. Conscript. Made by solo developer Jordan Mochi, this is listed on Steam as a survival horror, atmospheric World War I game, but I disagree with that. It is a survival game, it is atmospheric, and it has a World War I setting, but I feel the word horror here is way out of place. Now don't get me wrong, the trenches of World War I were certainly a horrific place, and no punches were pulled in this game. All the gory details are there. But when I hear the word horror, I'm typically thinking about scary games, and at no point was I scared. There were intense fights, difficult decisions, and surprises, everything you'd expect in a survival game, but there wasn't even so much as a single jump scare. So if you're looking for a horror game, I hate this word now, a scary game, this isn't it. What this is a fun survival game that'll make you think a lot about Resident Evil, and I mean a lot. You play a lone French soldier in the trenches of World War I at the Battle of Verdun. You hope to find your brother Pierre, who's also fighting here, but your main goal is to survive. Be it from enemy forces advancing, rats who have become too aggressive, chemical warfare, and more. And that's the storyline. It's pretty light. You don't get a lot more. You do get some flashbacks of being at home where you see your family and interact with them, probably in hopes of grounding you to the character and giving you more of an emotional attachment to them, but it didn't land for me. There's nothing beyond what's seen at face value. No evil plot, no hidden agenda, nothing. Just you surviving a war. If you've played the first Resident Evil, or really any of them, you'll be in very familiar territory. You basically have a combat system that feels lackluster and puzzles that are really carrying the game. For combat, you have various melee weapons that you can wind up and swing, and they feel pretty good and are actually a little overpowered. Your hits interrupt enemies' actions, so simply timing your swings correctly means you win the fight. Though since melee doesn't do a ton of damage, you just sort of stand there and slap, and slap, and slap. You do get some guns, but for the most part they feel very lackluster. The range is really small, the crosshairs close so very slowly, and the amount of damage they do feels like nothing. And enemies will just run up on you and slap you as you try to shoot them. So the gunplay turns into run, aim, shoot, run, repeat. Worst of all, the action of pumping a shotgun, cycling around in your rifle, or other menial tasks basically take an action. And they're not a short action, you stand there for a while to perform these, giving the enemy plenty of time to wind up a swing and hit you. So to actually use the weapon, you have to aim, shoot, run away, cycle the weapon, run, aim, shoot, repeat. It makes the weapons feel very useless. Upgrading the weapons will help a bit, and you will eventually find weapons that'll one-shot enemies, but I honestly found myself using melee more often or avoiding them completely, which as it turns out isn't a bad strategy. Enemy bodies don't disappear. They attract rats, those rats grow up into bigger, more annoying rats, and they poison you. Now there are mechanics in place to get around this, like using grenades to plug up rat holes, burning bodies, so on and so forth. But with how scarce resources are, it's tough to decide what to do. That grenade might keep away future rats, but it could save you in a pinch against a bunch of enemies later. And that is one of the fun parts of this game, the decision making. What weapons do you upgrade? What weapons do you repair? What do you spend your money on? Do you sell that one weapon you don't ever use? All of the resources are finite, and the vendor ain't restocking anything. Even your saves are finite, depending on the settings you chose, of course. All of this adds to the stress of playing. One bad death could lose so much progress, but you only have 4 saves left. Do you use it here, or do you try to trek on? And you're doing all of this while trying to solve the various puzzles put before you. In very typical Resident Evil fashion, you find many locked doors that require you to find keys or items to open them. But different from Resident Evil, the things here are at least grounded in the World War I setting. For example, there's a door with barbed wire on it, and you need to cut the wire to get through the door. Though to do so, you have to find the wire cutters, and for some reason they've been broken apart and put in 2 different places across the map. Still, this makes more sense than finding 3 ceramic dog heads and putting them into a door that then opens the door. Who makes these doors? The art used really enhances the atmosphere. It's a grungy pixel art. Though I'm not convinced the game is fully pixel art, the enemies and characters seem to be 3D modeled with a pixel shader overlay. It does feel a little weird on the 2D backdrop, but I could be wrong, so yell at me in the comments about it. Meanwhile, the art is accompanied by a somber soundtrack that lends to the atmosphere. It's not a soundtrack you're probably going to be listening to later, but it does what it's supposed to and it helps immerse you into the game. So, is it worth your time? If you're a Resident Evil 1 fan and you understand this isn't a scary game with a minimal story, then yeah, it's totally worth your time. The game is basically a love letter to Resident Evil 1. If you're interested, G-Man Lives goes far deeper into this comparison. At the end of the day, you'll walk out with about 12 hours of gameplay at a $20 price tag, but that 12 hours is just the first playthrough. With multiple endings and a new game plus, I imagine you could pump out another 12 hours at least. But for me personally, I had a really hard time sticking with this game. The absence of a story and the lackluster combat just didn't do it for me. There wasn't a driving force to keep going forward and actually finish the game, except to review it. That being said, I can recognize it's a well-made game and a lot of people are gonna like this. It's like a perfectly cooked salmon. Try as I might, my tongue doesn't like the taste of fish. That doesn't mean it was a bad dish, it just wasn't for me. And that's what we have here. It's not a bad game at all, it just wasn't for me. My name's Stryftek and thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, by all means, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time on Is It Worth Your Time?